afternoon. My name is Tim Lynch. I am your host for Legal Lines. Legal Lines is brought to you by the Massachusetts LGBTQ Bar Association, and we're brought to you live the third Wednesday of every month. We have an exciting show for you here today, and if anytime you'd like to call in, please do. Our number here is 617-708-3290. Again, 617-708-3290. My guest here today is from Mass Equality, Deputy Director Carly Burton, and she's going to be telling us the wonderful things they've been doing this past year, 2013, and what they have in store for 2014. Carly, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I always like to start out, when it's Mass Equality, I like to start out with letting people know what the origins of Mass Equality is, and what happened after we got marriage too. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the background?
Sure. So Mass Equality was formed in 2002 as a coalition of organizations really to fight for and protect marriage equality in the state of Massachusetts. And once that was secured in 2007, after the constitutional conventions, the organization went through a process of figuring out whether it should continue to exist, and decided after a lot of conversations and strategic planning that the amount of political power and organizing power that it had amassed through the days of the marriage equality fight was such that it did need to continue it to exist, and there was a place for the work and the value that Mass Equality could provide in the LGBTQ movement of Massachusetts. So we have been working on a variety of issues since marriage equality became a reality, from transgender civil rights to anti-bullying legislation to issues related to elders, to homeless youth. So sort of a wide variety of issues facing the LGBT community. And then, of course, we also work on electoral campaigns as well to make sure that there are champions within the State House and within the state administration that are focused on and supportive of LGBTQ issues.
Yeah, I think it was a wonderful decision to keep Mass Equality. And I think it also speaks to the success of Mass Equality, and that once they got marriage here, how all these other states had like a California equality, try to duplicate what we did here. So I'm just amazing success, and I'm so grateful that you did stay around to do the things you've been doing. And let's focus in on that. Tell us a little bit about 2013. What did you guys set out to do, and what were your accomplishments? Sure.
So, in 2013, it was the new beginning of a legislative cycle within the State House. So we had a number of new legislators in the building that we worked very hard to develop relationships with. We have a couple of large priorities that we are sort of in the process of working on. One is an update to the state's anti-bullying law, which passed in 2010. So we filed a bill, along with the Attorney General and the chairs of the Education Committee, that would require that school anti-bullying plans include enumerated categories of students who are more vulnerable to bullying, like LGBTQ students.
What would be the purpose of these categories?
Basically, it would help school districts and school personnel to recognize, again, that certain students are more vulnerable to bullying, and would help them in sort of the training of teachers and staff members on how to intervene in those situations, so that there's an understanding that certain kids who have actual perceived differentiating characteristics may be more vulnerable. And this is sort of, this came out of the legislation that passed in 2010 after the suicides of Phoebe Prince and Carl Walker Hoover. And out of that legislation, a commission was created headed by the Attorney General. And she went around the state and listened to stakeholders about what could be done to improve the law. And this was one of the key things that came out, that, in order to have a really effective law that really is, that works specifically for the LGBT community and other communities, we need to have these enumerated categories. So we are working very hard, actually, to get that passed. It has moved from the Education Committee to the Ways and Means Committee. So we've been working on that in 2013, and we're hoping to get it done in 2014.
Let me stop you. So these enumerated categories, and one would be the LGBTQ youth, they need to be identified so that there can be particular training and instruction to the teachers and administrators?
Yeah, so let me back up here. So every school district is required to put together a bullying prevention plan. And within that plan, it includes information about, how teachers are supposed to address bullying, what kind of, basically the fact that teachers and staff need to have training about how to intervene, that there needs to be curriculum for students. And so what this bill would do is it would just require that, in addition to sort of all that in the plan, there's a listing of those categories of students. And it's not just LGBT students, it's students who may have a disability, pregnant and parenting students who may be vulnerable to bullying, students with LGBT parents. It's sort of an acknowledgement in the plan that those students may be more vulnerable, and so it can empower teachers and staff to be more effective in intervening with those students. The other piece of the bill is that it also requires data collection so that we have a better sense of how the law is doing in terms of preventing bullying.
Well, that's great, and it's good that they're collecting data on this, because that will obviously serve as the basis for further work on these issues. What else have you guys been working on?
Sure. So we have been working quite a bit on the homeless youth issue. I believe when I was here before, I think we talked about the creation of the Unaccompanied Homeless Youth Commission that is now it's about a little over a year old. And we have just gone through the first statewide count of unaccompanied homeless youth. So we worked on developing a survey tool along with my other commissioners to disseminate all across the state to homeless service providers and youth service providers through schools, libraries, all over the place, to try to get a good sense of the number of unaccompanied homeless youth. And on that survey, there are a few questions on sexual orientation and gender identity, and whether, if someone was kicked out of their house because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, which is a big issue, both here and nationally. The numbers are high. About 40% of unaccompanied homeless youth are LGBT. And so
And that's based on the data you collected, or is that some
that's national
studies?
data through the Gay and Lesbian Task Force. We are in the process of analyzing the data that has been collected through our statewide count. It was actually just done at the end of January, so we're still
You still don't
analyzing.
have those numbers yet?
We don't have those numbers yet. We're in the process.
Do you have a number of how many unaccompanied homeless youth there are in the Commonwealth?
No, not totally. Because there hasn't been one comprehensive way to get at that number. So that is what this survey would try and do. That's what this count would try and do. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has an estimate, but that is only based on people who are still in school. And so
That's like 8,000
Yeah.
You're up to. I think that my understanding is 8,000.
Right, which is significant.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. But for the Homeless Youth Commission, our definition of homeless youth is actually expanded up to age 24. So those folks from 18 to 24 may not be counted in the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education numbers.
And my understanding is that the department's numbers are those going to school.
Yes, exactly.
So one would think that the number of unaccompanied homeless unaccompanied youth in general, I would gather to say a large percentage of them are not going to school.
That's true. I mean,
So-
in some cases, school can be seen as sort of a stable place for homeless youth to try and keep that at least intact in their lives. But yes, I mean, the data is collected through the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is disseminated by every 2 years. And, it also sort of, if someone is not in school on that day, they won't obviously answer the survey, and so that data won't be captured either. So I think that number, while huge, I think it's probably an underestimate of how many young people there are.
Yeah, it's just extraordinarily troubling. Okay, so you've been collecting this data. I interrupted you.
That's okay.
So, and then the purpose of doing this is what?
Well, so we have been collecting the data, one, to really get a sense of the scope of the problem in Massachusetts. We're the first state to have a statewide commission like this, and the first state to do a really comprehensive and consistent count across the state. So just having those numbers will be really helpful. And then from that, we will be able to figure out kind of what services are most necessary, what kind of wraparound services, what kind of shelter services, what kind of prevention services are most useful and necessary to sort of bring this number down so that there aren't so many young people who are experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, I mean, it can never be understated, or should never can be overstated that the effect of this on their whole lives is quite dramatic, and the effect on society in general.
Right. I mean,
this is everybody's problem.
Oh yeah. I mean, especially for LGBTQ youth, but for all homeless youth, I mean, the risk of victimization is very high. The risk of substance abuse issues, the risk of mental health challenges, all is very high, which just leads to, greater costs for everyone in terms of medical costs and, sort of societal costs.
Yeah. So, okay, so you're doing, anything else on that issue, or that's a lot?
That's probably it on that one. We're also working on the Transgender Equal Access Bill, which is a follow-up to an act relative to gender identity, which passed in 2011, was signed in 2012. Basically, what the Equal Access Bill would do is it would prevent discrimination on the basis of gender identity in public spaces, known as areas of public accommodation. So grocery stores, hotels, public transportation, restaurants, exactly. We have been working on this legislatively, but it is unlikely that it will move very quickly. And so we're working on trying to kind of build some momentum outside of the legislature to show that, public accommodations protections is not a scary thing, and the state should just
deal with that.
Do it, and it's not scary at all.
Well, there were